question. If you wouldn't mind just giving just a little introduction as to who you are and what you do, please.
I'm Mark Webster. I'm the MD of Give to Get in Europe, based out of the UK. We are a social impact company that helps clients do a number of different things. We help them find their purpose in the world over and above the great products and services that they might make. So we do strategy work around that piece. We help them then design and deliver programs for them. So typically that will be there with their employees and also with their customers. And that might be at scale up to sort of 10,000 people, but as small and intimate as kind of 50 people. And then increasingly we do a lot of measurement and evaluation in terms of looking at what's effective, but rather than looking at the outputs, it's more at the trying to develop the outcomes of what people are achieving.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Super. And I think, it's so unique what you guys are doing. I don't know of anybody else doing that. I think people dabble in sort of charity elements or something to do with working with the community, but not at the scale, the professionalism that you guys do. So something just really, really unique in what you achieve. Super. So why did you decide to get into this industry and sort of sustainability being sort of part of that? And I think, a lot of people associate environment with sustainability, but obviously building community and the positive impact that is derived from being sustainable is a huge part of it. Why was that something that was sort of so important to you and to you as a business?
Yeah, well, my background is actually in advertising and media. So I worked at some big agencies in London. And then I was fortunate enough to meet Grady Lee, who's the founder of our business now. And it was actually post 9/11 in the US. And it was pretty inspirational because they came out with this idea called Rockcore, which was this groundswell that was happening in the US around people wanting to come together to help each other. And Rockcore was a very simple insight behind it is that young people actually want, and it was aimed at 16 to 21-year-olds. Young people want to actually go out and help in their local community, city, etc. But they don't have the tools or the organisation to be able to do that. And as well, it was at that time it was about a slight change in behaviour. So if you incentivize someone to do that, then they'll go and do it. So a very simple idea was if you give 4 hours of your time, you got a ticket to a gig, and that gig was Lady Gaga or Snoop, and they all played, 4 or 5 of these global artists all playing at venues. It's like a mini festival. So you got access to something that you wouldn't, as a young person, ever normally go and see.
Yeah, definitely.
And it was all underpinned by brands. So that was my connection. Is that one of the brands that founded or Boost Mobile that sponsored the program in the US? Is that I was introduced to one of my global colleagues, to the guys at Rockcore, and I was really inspired actually by what they did. And I helped them develop Rockcore as part of my role. We rolled it out into Europe with Orange, and then Coca-Cola in various different markets as well. And then it went on to Japan and Asia and Australia. So that kind of like fueled my passion for that area, and that idea was how Give to Get was then born. Yep. So Rockcore evolved into Give to Get, and where we are now.
Yeah, fantastic. It's just such a great idea. Like you said, people want, and we're seeing at the moment, with the current pandemic, people are wanting to help. Yeah. It's just having the tools and the access and the strategy to it. That's
exactly, and I think it's if people are getting better at organising themselves, on a local level and also, a national level, I think it's being able to just harness people who want to go and volunteer and making it meaningful for them and making sure that they feel part of something, and rewarded for it as well. And that's not necessarily a physical ticket like rock call, but they feel as though they're part of a movement.
Yeah, and it's about having a purpose, isn't it? And actually doing something for a purpose as opposed to just, for the sake of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super, thank you. One word, this is the tricky one. How would you define sustainability or a sustainable event? But sustainability in one word, go.
We had quite a lot of debate about this, and we plumped on we're going to go for life.
Nice.
And the reason behind saying it's life is that sustainability has to be part of everything we do, not just now, but certainly in the future, because without it, there's not going to be anything left.
Yeah.
So it's just a fundamental necessity, is how I describe it.
Very good. Now, can you recommend another business, whether it's someone you partnered with or you've seen on social media that sort of impressed you or inspired you? Anyone you would recommend?
So I've kind of looked at that like slightly differently. First of all, there's one company just locally to ourselves who started last year, who I just admire them for what they've done and how they adapt their business to what's going on at the moment. And it's called Otto's, and they're
you can say me then.
present company is present
close.
Present company included, obviously. But just as a sustainable business, young guys who came out of uni and rather than going straight into jobs said, right, we're going to get together, we're going to form this company. I've got a huge amount of admiration for them doing that. And it's a zero carbon business. They only work with companies or they only source their food within 10 miles of where
and sorry, what was the name? Who were they?
They're called Otto's.
Otto's. Okay.
Cool. And they haven't been able to do what they wanted to do. So, they're currently out on their bikes locally delivering food parcels to old people in the community. And I just really admire their approach and their ethics behind what they're doing. And then secondly, we could, I think you mentioned it earlier, is that there's some fantastic companies that are making, you mentioned stands out of recycled plastics and stuff like that, and the technology behind that is great. But I always kind of look for those companies as well that are legacy businesses, but they're trying really, really hard to change. And I'd sort of call out Unilever in the UK, and their personal care and cleaning detergent product business, simply because it's tough for them to make a change. It's really hard.
And
really
hard as a business.
They've got to answer to shareholders, and people want to see their profits continue, etc., etc. But I think companies like that are really making a big impact, and when they start making it a big impact, and that happens at scale. And again, to call out Unilever, simply because it is slightly easier if you're a technology brand or if you're a bank, because you're not making physical stuff. But I think I admire them just trying to really push it year after year after year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having worked in a large corporation, and all of the sort of the multi-layers, and like you say, shareholders and all of the different levels of management that you've got to sort of win over and get on board with what you're trying to do. That is a massive challenge. Yeah. No, great couple of answers. Thank you. So if you could give one piece of advice to somebody sort of starting out in sustainability or wanting to make their next event more sustainable, what would that piece of advice be?
I think it definitely be around the measurement piece. So think about the outcomes of what you're achieving, and measure that success, or even or even a failure of it. Because I think there's too much emphasis put on, right, we've got to do things that are
Yeah.
really successful.
And
It's not
perfect
actually,
first time, and that's
yeah,
not going to be how sustainability is going to go.
yeah, correct. If you'll get more learnings about something that hasn't been successful or has failed than you will from programs that have been successful. So I think, being able to, as I say, going back, and I know it sounds like a broken record, but that outcomes piece is really, really important. I think is really,
So I
really
think obviously knowing where you're starting, so what that baseline is, and
correct.
then like you say, being able to measure the impact that you're having afterwards. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So do you think the pandemic in itself is making people rethink, what's important and what they need to be bringing to their next event? How everybody's responded globally to this crisis. Do you think that sort of spurred people on to think, well, actually, how could we bring an activity or something into our next event that would be able to harness that ability to want to make a difference and to be able to help? Do you think that's maybe motivating people to use guys like you more?
Uh, yeah, I think so. Some of the questions that we've got are definitely are coming from the place of, okay, we're understanding about what's happening and about some of the changes that people are talking about, some of the information that's now going about how people feel about. They don't want to see the same change that is. That they don't want to work in the same way that they were previously. So we are definitely seeing things like that as almost more challenging questions, if you like, which is good. I think for us, there's been some things about, well, we want people to do things at home, and I think there are some there's some real challenges around that. About the impact that you can make. If you're producing stuff at home, I think it's got to be galvanized around your community, for example, rather than just individuals doing something for coming back from brands and companies, if that makes sense. So getting behind, a lack of protective materials for the NHS, that needs to happen where you've got in the local community someone who's got materials, someone who's got a sewing machine, someone who's got these different things and coming together like that, rather than it being like we want an individual piece of activity for somebody to do at home by themselves. I don't think that hasn't got any longevity in it at all. We're going to launch some programs in the autumn, which has got a working title of City Impact Weeks at the moment, and that'll be around supporting those causes that just aren't being supported at the moment.
Especially when we're sort of hopefully starting to come out of it by then. And I think, inherently people have rather short-term memories, and people will tend to bounce back to maybe not the normal of before, but a new kind of normal. And whilst everything at the moment is very fresh and feels very sort of important, when you start going back to work and think you start socializing again, do those things drop off? So I was going to ask about sort of projects more for when things that we're allowed out. And
absolutely, and it's currently working with cities because they're having some real challenges at the moment. If you look at things like like homelessness is horrific at the moment, the all around the world, actually, because that infrastructure about how those people were supported just doesn't exist. They're not being fed properly, they haven't got places to go to, they're the way the pandemic's spreading through that community is just rife. So it's not highlighting that as a specific thing, but it's a good example of like cities are beginning and communities are beginning to go, right, we've got a real problem here. So how can we come together when in the future to be able to help solve those kind of problems again. And I think there are more innovative ways that I've been able to do that now, where you get brands working in conjunction with people.
Yeah.
So, when you look at things like, crowdfunding platforms that are raising an amazing amount of money for the NHS at the moment, just as one example, is that I think what's coming out of this as well is actually we can do this slightly differently. And actually, if we can get brands and companies to match fund what's going on with what people want to go and achieve, then those kind of things are going to be interesting, because that's going to get programs out there as well. So things like that are quite interesting that are coming out of it that we're working on at the moment.
Sort of attention and budget on sustainability and sustainable initiatives.
Yeah.
Do you think, in light of what's happened, that's going to be sidelined, or do you think that there will be like a new focus and a new attention that's given to sustainability?
Well, I would hope that people are enjoying breathing cleaner air, right? And
I think so.
yeah, some of the benefits that and some of the impact that we've seen just in a short period of time. And I think, as the narrative and the story changes, there will be, look what's been achieved so quickly, and I would hope that people will embrace that, and that there'll be a greater emphasis put on sustainability in this area moving forward. I just from a personal perspective, I'd hate it if people just reverted back to what was happening historically, and actually this is a way of supercharging what could happen with sustainability now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know the focus is going to be a lot on, especially for small businesses, on, building the economy and, developing the economic development side of it. But I think, like you said before, sustainability is key to all of that happening at all, whether it's, business, the economy, society, community, the environment, that everything's all interlinked. So by approaching things in a sustainable way, it's not that you're not focusing on economic development, but you're just doing it in a way, like you said, that's going to have longevity and actually successful. So hopefully those connections will be made, and things will happen in the right way. Fingers crossed.
I agree with that.
And how optimistic are you about sort of the event industry post COVID-19 in terms of, changes that might come about? I know you said that your programs, you'll start in sort of smaller groups rather than anything on a mass scale, but in terms of changes that might happen, or rather should happen, and how likely we are to bounce back to the sort of the event industry that it was before? Do you think that's likely to happen, or do you think there'll be some significant changes?
We are social animals in our design, and therefore I do feel that people are going to want to come back together and learn together, be able to solve things together, communicate, exchange ideas, so I do believe it might take a bit of time, maybe moving into next year, but I definitely still, there'll be a role for large groups of people coming together. And I think part of that development will be that people will have spent this time, like we were talking about, is that thinking new ideas, developing a new way, slightly different way of working. And I think there'll be a big injection of new ideas into the industry about how people will work. And as an optimist, you look at that and you think, well, that's really exciting, actually, because the industry could lead the thinking of what's happening, because it's been probably the hardest hit industry, you could argue, next to retail and stuff like that as well. And often out of that, because it will survive and it will be successful, but often after those difficult periods, you see this amazing change in different approaches and new ideas that have been developed.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so it's so true. And then the last question then, and maybe the most important of all, what's the first thing you're going to be doing when you're allowed out again and lockdown's lifted? What's on the top of your
Well,
list?
we're I've got 4 boys, so a family of 6. So we've missed, or will miss, Adam's next week, sort of 3 birthdays.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be
A
having
huge
some sort
party.
of mighty party.
Absolutely, and it's so important. It's so lovely, actually. Everyone I've spoken to, their answer for that has all been family related. So someone
Yes.
wants to visit their dad, a hug from their mum, see their
Yeah.
grandparents. I mean, yeah, it just shows you, doesn't it, what's important. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, it does. It does. Absolutely. Absolutely.
wow. Amazing. Thank you so much. That's been
That's
really, really brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
a pleasure.